Howdy, folks, and welcome back to the penultimate chapter of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I'm Melissa.
I am Luke.
He is. And we are here discussing chapter number 17, The Heir of Slytherin.
Oh, boy.
This exciting chapter was 21 pages long, which is 6.16% of the book. Luke, tell us all the stuff that just happened.
Harry enters the Chamber of Secrets worried that one of the giant serpentine statues would begin moving with deadly intent. At the end of the chamber, Harry spots an enormous stone likeness of Salazar Slytherin. At the foot of this statue is the lifeless red-headed Ginny Weasley. He rushes in to check on her. Dropping to his knees and casting his wand aside, Harry tries shaking her awake. Harry is then surprised to find a misty and blurry Tom Riddle call out that she won't wake up. Riddle tells Harry how his memory had been preserved in the diary. Harry lifts up Ginny and pleads with Riddle to help him save Ginny and finds his wand has been picked up by Riddle. Tom refuses to return the wand as Harry sets Ginny back down. Riddle describes how Ginny's worries and woes have been strengthening his diary-ingrained memory since the beginning of the school year. He describes his plot to soul-swap bodies with Ginny and how he used Ginny to kill the school roosters and open the chamber over and over, letting the basilisk out to attack students. After beginning to distrust her diary, Ginny cast it aside, and this is when it came into Harry's possession. After having heard Ginny's telling of recent history, including Harry's famous beginnings, Riddle was very pleased when Harry wrote in the diary. Harry is confused as to why Riddle would be so excited to meet him, and Riddle goes on to describe how he tried gaining Harry's trust by showing him his capture and frame job of Hagrid, even though it was Riddle himself that had previously opened the chamber to fulfill Salazar's noble goals. Whenever Ginny saw that Harry had the diary, she freaked out and stole it from the boys' dormitory. Knowing about Harry's previous heroics, Riddle goes on to describe how he forced Ginny to write on the wall again and come down to the chamber to wait for Harry Potter to save the day. Harry is asked how he survived as a baby, and Riddle reveals that Tom Marvolo Riddle is an anagram for I am Lord Voldemort. Dumbstruck, Harry lets Tom know that Voldemort never became the greatest wizard, since even at the height of his power, Voldy was still afraid of Dumbledore. This show of loyalty summons Fawkes the Phoenix carrying the school sorting hat. Riddle thinks that Harry's provided weapons is laughable. Harry then reveals that Harry's mother died as the counter-charm to save his life as a baby, and Riddle uses this as confirmation that Harry is not actually special like he himself is. Tom summons the basilisk, and Harry hears the King of Serpents hit the floor from the enormous statue's mouth. Eyes closed, Harry hears the phoenix peck the snake's eyes out. The sorting hat is knocked by the snake to Harry, and Harry pulls a sword from the hat, which he uses to counter-stab the snake through the top of the mouth while getting bit by one of the fangs in the process. Harry begins to die, but is saved by the Phoenix's tears. After being healed, the Phoenix drops the diary on Harry's lap, and he quickly stabs the diary with the basilisk fang that he had just pulled from his arm. This kills Riddle's memory and wakens Ginny. She confesses everything she did this school year, and Harry tells her that all is okay, and Riddle plus Basilisk are dead. Together they head back to where Ron has cleared a way through the collapsed tunnel. The group, along with a memory-erased Lockhart, are given a lift by Fawkes up and out of the Chamber of Secrets. They are met by a disappointed Myrtle, but quickly head to Professor McGonagall's office.
Can you believe that here we are in the second to last chapter and we were meeting some new people? Ish.
Kind of. Yeah, one's a direct meet, one is a name given.
It's a name. We meet finally in person.
It's kind of tough.
In embodiment.
A little bit more embodiment.
We have the ghostly embodiment-ish of the memory of Tom Riddle, which is more than the sentient writing we got in the diary or the memory that he didn't notice us in.
Right. And we did meet face to face with Voldemort last year, but even this is still kind of different. So I think it's fair to include it here as well.
All right. Are we done meeting all the versions of Voldemort at this point, though?
Oh, at this point, yeah. We'll see how else he decides to show up.
Oh, all right. Then we also, Professor Dippet gets a first name. He is Armando.
Armando Dippet. That's a fun name.
Armando. We have no new locations. Because we already made it in the chamber. Although the chamber does have a giant statue of Salazar Slytherin. I feel like that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. With a long, long beard and a monkey face. That was interesting.
True. Then we have one magicabulary, the glimmering sword with rubies in the hilt.
Sounds pretty fancy.
Yeah.
So our illustration this chapter, we see the diary sputtering ink with the fang through the cover and a feather floating in the air.
2 feathers, actually.
Okay, 2 feathers.
Yeah, I noticed that now. 2 feathers. Like, I very much feel like this is an action shot.
Yeah, like as he basically drops it on Harry's lap and stabs it like right away. Fox is still kind of just barely flying overhead.
Right. Imagine if you had just like picked up this book for the first time and you're flipping through and
you're not getting anything out of that. Like that means nothing.
Why is the book bleeding?
Right. Like what is going on? It's a really good one. I really like this illustration.
Yes. So is that like in your running for end of book illustration favorites? You have to start thinking. We're getting close.
We are getting close to that full book superlative that we'll have at our very special end of book discussion where we bring the whole group back. We'll bring back our bad guy Breadcrumbs, Detective Benji. We'll bring back our first time reader Riley, and we'll also bring in our Gryffindor Quidditch correspondent Abby. The whole group will be here, so join us in 2 or 3 weeks.
A reasonably distant but not too far off amount of time.
Well said. So join us there, and we'll tell you what we have decided, what our actual favorite illustrations are. For me, this one's definitely in the running. I think this one's very telling.
Honestly, I have not even thought about favorite illustrations. I do have a favorite chapter.
Yeah, I really haven't even thought about it until this one, because this one is like the first one I think really stands out to me. Like we'll get there. We'll talk.
So Luke, what notes did you have about this chapter?
I had plenty of thoughts, as you heard in that long summary. So for such a not really that long page number chapter, a lot happens. I remember even like the first time I read this book, when I was 11, 12, whatever, I thought the anagram of the Voldemort, Tom Marvolo Voldemort, or Riddle I am Lord Voldemort,
yes,
was so cool. I thought that was really neat. I mean, clearly she had the name Voldemort and backtracked as to a name that she could fit into that. It was a cool idea. It worked out for a pretty interesting name, Riddle, cool word. Tom, it's a pretty common name, which clearly the character dislikes. His, dirty muggle father gave him that name. And Marvolo is just kind of a cool name too. So, but I really liked the comment that he had when he brings this up. He says, Voldemort is my past, present, and future. He leads into the anagram with that. And that, like, alone, I remember reading my hardcover book, back whenever. That was so cool. I was so excited because it just like completely opened up so much more depth to this character that last year we only heard about and then saw in kind of a half-life kind of way, which, yeah, I mean, it was creepy for creepy's sake, but it wasn't like I was really worried for Harry. This gives, I think, a little more credibility to the dangerous aspect of Voldemort. You get some of his personal history, and I'm curious to see where that goes, if we ever see him again or learn more about Voldemort.
Well, I think that's one of like the draws of this book and this series in general, is that when you think about, like, I'm going to pull in all kinds of references here. So here we go. When you think about like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there was always like one big bad guy every season. Or if I watch a Marvel movie, there's one bad guy every movie who almost always gets defeated unless he's, somebody's adopted brother, and then he gets thrown in prison.
Right. Or ends up being a good guy somehow at the end and joins the team.
Random. Or just in general, with these kinds of even serial stories, there's usually one big baddie.
Right.
They fight him, goes goes away. We get a new big baddie. So reading this book, you were really like, okay, who's the new bad guy? Who's the new bad guy? Who's the new bad guy? Oh, wait, it's the same bad guy.
In a completely kind of different way.
Yes.
Like, how often do you...
was the moment.
How many stories do you fight the memory of the arch villain from last book? Like, you're fighting a memory.
The arch villain of the villain from the last book that you've already beaten twice.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I like it.
Yeah. Like,
clearly.
It was that moment that I'm like, oh, that was good. Because, earlier in the book when Dumbledore says it's not who, but how. And you're like, huh? What do you mean not? How do you mean how?
Right.
Well, that's how. And it was very, very good. Now, my second comment for you is on the anagram. I read that and go, oh, how much time must that have taken to figure out, like, to get from a name to Voldemort? Like, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, some people, their brains think that way. Sometimes I can. I don't naturally do it, but I mean, like, whenever we play Cranium, the board game,
yes.
the lexicon type things. I know you and I, when we're on a team, we're usually fighting to see who gets to answer it quicker. Like, it's one of the skill sets that we typically bring to the team. It
is, but to create one, like, I can look at a collection of letters.
You can decipher it better than you could encrypt one or create your own out of nothing.
Right. Like, I can look at one, and since I know it's going to be a word, I can usually find the word. But to look at a bunch of letters and say, okay, I need this to make a word. What word can I make out of it? Like a new random word? That sounds overwhelming, especially since they were in the name Lord Voldemort to start with. Like, I already know these letters as Voldemort. It's kind of like when you're trying to tell someone about a song that you really like, and you're trying to think of a line in a song, but there's background music.
Oh,
you're distracted by the background music, and so your brain can't function to process a second song.
Yeah,
that's how it is. I'm looking at the words Lord Voldemort. How am I supposed to process a different word when that's the words I see?
Right. It's like when you're at trivia in the music round, and you're like, I'm still stuck on the one that we heard 2 songs ago because for some reason I couldn't think of it then, and now I've got this one playing in my head. How do I figure this one out?
Yes.
As the previous one, because we still have that blank, and I have to figure that out.
Yes.
So the description of the chamber itself always also felt so eerie to me. I mean, like the columns with the snake carvings up around it, and then this enormous statue of a guy that we've heard a lot about.
And not a lot of good stuff about.
And we've never gotten any kind of visual description of what he did look like. So I wonder if, like, even in, like, the history books, if they have, like, actual descriptions of what these guys looked like, the original founders in general. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I just remember thinking, like, this was a lot darker than
way darker.
The first book. The chamber's way cooler. Like, I liked, from the first book, I liked all of the
obstacle course.
Yes, the obstacle. Sorry, my brain is not with the words tonight. So, talking on a podcast is going to go well. Mm-hmm. The obstacle course was definitely more fun, but this is what an underground secret chamber should look like.
Right. Yeah, it shouldn't be we'll go, down here and do the mud runner course and, then, get through and and
then you get your participants medal at the end.
Right. This really is this was a hidden place, and
right,
like it felt dangerous, like, because even right when he's walking in, he was telling himself, any one of these statues could be the real snake. Like they were so realistic and clearly terrifying for him. Like, he was so, in the moment afraid of what could happen, because in an instant he could have been dead. It's so much more dangerous feeling this time than the last one. Even though there were a lot more issues to deal with, none of them were really like, I didn't feel the same gravity of danger to Harry's life than this instance.
Right. I'm with you. I agree.
Poor Ginny. She's been like abused all year by this sadist. Amongst many other really negative descriptors. Clearly she fell for his charms because she used it as a diary, when usually you're just kind of using that to, get your own emotions and thoughts, out, so you don't have to process them, on your own. And then this starts talking back, and it listens to her and goads her on over and over all year, and learns her most vulnerable, secrets and wishes and dreams, and then uses those against her and possesses her. And man, that's a tough first year at Hogwarts.
Right. I hope there's a wizard counseling.
Yeah, guidance counselor somewhere. Somebody to listen.
Therapist.
Yeah.
Although she's going to have trust issues.
Yeah.
She should. I mean, this is definitely like...
You can't just roll over and be okay after this. That just doesn't happen.
Like, and I feel like sometimes young girls are so susceptible to that kind of influence, you know, the unknown voice telling you, you know what I mean? Like sucking you in and then, you know.
Finally having someone to talk to and it just turns out bad. Or
man, doesn't that sound like something that could happen on today's social media websites?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or apps.
Yeah.
Not to go too much into that, but like that's what it really reminds me of is all the terrible things that can happen to kids on social media.
Yeah, I mean it's fairly prescient, for how it's weird how that wasn't really a thing in 1999. No. I mean, it was just starting, but it wasn't nearly as prevalent for kids of this age as it is today.
Right. Oh yeah,
and that's
much
kind of the scarier thing, I think. Is how relevant this has become over the past 15 years.
Oh, okay, kids. So that whole, like, just don't trust the people on the other side of the phone. Don't trust the guy in the diary.
Well said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next.
I like that it took Harry a little while to stop trusting Tom. It might have made him seem a little gullible, but I think it does show his loyalty and trusting in people's side, kind of like Dumbledore a bit, because right along with that, he's so in such full force hero mode that basically focused on where's that snake? I have to get Ginny and get her out of here to keep us both alive, and so he's not necessarily gonna be overly analytical as to what's Tom Riddle like, why is he Misty? What's he doing here? Is he a part of this? Like, he's already kind of developed a little bit of a relationship with Tom Riddle. Clearly he didn't necessarily trust him, but he didn't not trust him. Like, I feel like he was fairly neutral, but I wasn't surprised that it took him a little bit to not realize that Tom set all of this up. What do you think on that?
So I actually had a comment about that in my notes. My thought is, okay, so it took him a really long time to catch on to his deception. And mine was more like, why did it take so long? I see where you're coming from, that it was very much like, hey, it shows his loyalty and trusting in people. He's also 12.
He doesn't have Hermione there saying, why is this guy here? Like, that's the part that he's missing. He doesn't have that. He has the pure...
because she was petrified.
Right. He has the pure, let's go, let's get this done.
Yep.
Are you going to help me? If not, get out of my way.
You've given me information. Like, you were helpful before. Let's...
Right. I have no reason not to think you're going to play the good guy card like you did in the memory that I saw in.
He is very much one who, I trust you until you give me a reason not to.
Right.
I think Hermione's a bit more of a skeptic. She's like, I don't trust anything until I can prove, like... Until
I have a logical reason to trust it.
Yeah. Harry is innocent until proven guilty, and Hermione is guilty until you can prove innocent. And sometimes the Hermione way is not like a bad life skill, and he needed it here.
It's always about balance.
My thought about
that's
it
what
is...
the whole trio brings. They bring balance to each other.
Yes. But like, my take on it was, so is Harry really that thick, not catching on to it? I mean, I get why he didn't. Or do you think that it was like JK going, okay, I need everybody who's reading this to really understand what's happening here.
I need to fit in a lot of exposition, and I want that to feel more natural than it does when you're usually talking to the villain.
Well, not even the exposition, but like, I need everybody to really get that what's happening here is that some dude, when he was 16, put a whole bunch of evil memories in a book. A kid found the book. A kid wrote in the book. Evil memory dude stole like life force from unknowing kid.
Yeah, possessed her
and
all
is
year.
Sucking life out of her. And is now targeting Harry because evil memory dude is like pubescent Voldemort. So we're going to go really slowly so that we can do it step by step to make sure that nobody out there, not the 12-year-olds reading the book, not the 50-year-olds reading the book, not the people who aren't paying attention and skimming through and missing things, they're not going to miss this. There is no way you can miss the fact that this dude is a memory in a book taking over a kid because he's really Voldemort.
Right.
Everybody got it? Okay, so I'm going to say it again. So we're going to lay it out one more time. Hold on. Okay, so wait, so you're Voldemort. That's right. Okay,
I'm the
you're
memory
all
of
me.
Voldemort.
Right.
But I'm taking over this life force from this girl that I've been possessing on and off all year.
And let me tell
as
you,
bait to get you down here because she told me how important you were to my future life.
So my past person is going to ruin you, who ruined my future, who's now your past.
Right.
So let me
Got it.
tell you, having read this book many, many times, it takes many times to read all of that and understand. Like, it took me several readings, not the first time I read it, like, oh, I'm going to read this part again, but like revisits to the whole book going, okay, now what is, how is he doing this? So I think she did a good job. I think she was right in doing it step by step by step, because it is very confusing.
Mm-hmm. And I like that it wasn't
which
like
kind of goes.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, it's kind of like how the whole plot has felt to me this year. Like, just, it's a little sketchy. We've said that a lot. It's a little sketchy how Dobby knew this and how Lucius decided to do that. And so now this whole, like, there's this memory in a book, but is he possessing Ginny and she's forgetting it? Is he talking her into doing these things? Is he pulling life out of her? Like what exactly? Like, it took me a very long time to figure it out. And even now, I'm still a little sketchy on exactly how the Ginny stuff happened throughout like all of the attacks and stuff. Was she present when the snake was around?
Right.
So,
yeah, like the actual details of how did that work?
Yes.
The logistics of, did she actually go down here all the time and open the door? And
because I'm a logical sequential, like, I need to know all the pieces. And
this book asks you to make several logical leaps just so you can get by and then revisit it when you get to this point. Basically, like once you learn the information, then you can start going back, and that's when some of the holes, I think, start showing up more so. Is like, how does that work? Where normally, if you just read through it and you just start book 3, like, you're not going to worry about it. Like, who cares? Like, that's fine. Let's keep going.
Right.
I just need
My
more.
only point with that is, I think this one time she did do a good job of saying, okay, this is exactly how it's working. For the most part, because it is very complicated.
Mm-hmm. And we still have one other chapter.
Right. Well, and I'm really okay with the complicated magic. I like the idea that there can be complicated magic.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while. So I appreciate the step-by-stepness of it.
It might be a character trait of Tom Riddle because he was head boy. We know he was, smart in school. So he could be the type of student, or, well, I guess the memory of him is the student version of him. So he might be the type of student that likes to show off a little bit. Like, hey, this is pretty neat magic that I did to get this all done. Like,
at the age of 16.
Right. So, like, I need you, who I'm going to kill. Don't worry. I need you to understand how impressive this was. Like, he's a little bit of a show-off, I think.
I was going to say, it's such a typical bad guy move. I have you in my clutches. Let me expound upon all the ways why I am amazing, and I am going to,
in this case, I think it's a little different, though, because he was still waiting for that full, like, it was like his progress bar was at like 70 to 80%. He wasn't at 100% yet, so he couldn't actually, use the wand yet, is what I'm assuming. Like, I don't think we really know. I don't think he could have used the wand until Ginny was actually dead, until he was fully transferred over, however that works. My assumption is that he wasn't able to actually do any self-corporeal magic.
So let's go back to, talked about wands, so I have a wand comment. And you were saying how you didn't think Riddle could use
right, yeah,
the wand. So this kind of jumps to the basilisk part, though.
Mm-hmm.
My question was, why doesn't Riddle just attack Harry with the wand when the basilisk loses its eyes? Why does he just yell for him to use his nose and smell for Harry?
Right.
But you think it's because his progress bar is not full. He's not at 100%.
Right. I that's, to me, it's almost like, think about it as us as muggles. Maybe we're like the 99% human, and wizards are like that, get that 100%. So maybe he's at the 95 to 99% on his soul strengthening transfer thing that's going on with Ginny.
And the last little bit is
that last little bit is what it takes. Like, it has to be all the way up. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a weird way of thinking of it, but I don't think he could do magic until he's 100%.
Okay, I'll give you that.
So my next 2 comments kind of go hand in hand. Number 1, Riddle knowing about the person dying for you counter charm. He says, "Oh, that is a pretty powerful counter charm," when he hears about Harry's mother giving his life, and then Riddle not remembering that Phoenix Tears are, like, apparently one of the most potent healing powers in the world. Like, he doesn't realize until too late. It just feels that feels off to me. That
Yeah,
like he's not
because-
surprised by the one and forgets about the other while it's happening in front of him.
Well, let's talk about the first one. Like, Riddle knowing about the dying for you counter charm. How do you know about that at 16 and then not ever think about that? Like, how is that not something you just are aware of? And because I kind of screwed you over there, man.
Is that kind of a common, like a well-known thing? Maybe that Harry doesn't know because he didn't grow up in the Wizarding World, but neither did Tom. But
or maybe he's only 12, and that's more of like a fourth year thing.
Right? Yeah, I don't know. It's the dichotomy between those two things seemed
because
off
it seems
to me.
like, well, I feel like,
I mean, clearly he didn't think about the first one when he was killing his mother. He didn't realize that was going on when that happened either. So maybe he's a more retrospective thinker.
But that's what I mean. Like, if you know it as a 16-year-old, how did you not think about that when you were off killing? Unless by that point you've killed so many people that
right, yeah, and so many of them are maybe less as they have a little less integrity or love. You know, that they are okay with giving their, however that ends up working. We don't really know what she did or anything, but maybe there aren't as many witches that he killed that had the same thing going on that Lily might have. I don't know. That's We'll probably revisit that.
But really, like, Riddle knowing about the dying for you counter charm, let's call that like a fourth or fifth year kind of a thing. Sure. Don't you think Phoenix Tears with healing power should have been like a first year defense against the dark arts kind of lesson?
I would think so. I mean, we hear about werewolves so often.
If only there was a consistent curriculum.
Right. Okay, so my last note. I like that Harry was so aware and respectful and sensitive to how difficult this is going to be for Ginny. And he doesn't just blurt it out to, well, especially Ron, that she had been, a big part of this. Or, even though she clearly didn't mean to be, like all year long.
Yes.
That was a pretty well done by Harry, I think.
I agree. I think most kids would just be like, "Oh yeah, well it was Jenny's diary," and
hey Jenny, tell us about that. What was that all about? Come on.
Right, like how'd that happen? Although really, Jenny, tell me about it because I want to know. Me, Melissa, but no, I think
it was very tactful.
I think that kind of goes back to like his loyalty and like trusting thing that we talked about earlier in this episode. That like he's gonna protect his friends. And not just from like dangers, but like
their emotional health as well.
Yeah.
Which we've seen him do with Neville last book. He's the one that stood up and said, Neville, you're worth 10 of Malfoy. Don't worry about what he's telling you. You're better than that. So he is very aware of those things.
Or even on the train, the very first time he met Ron, and Ron's like, oh, we don't have a lot of money. And I have these hand-me-downs.
And then he's like, it's not a big deal. Like, I didn't have any money either. Like,
Right. Like he always he knows what to say. We talked about in an earlier episode, like how Ron and Hermione always kind of know what to say to sort of bring Harry back. But Harry knows what to say too.
And I think
to help people feel better.
We miss that a bit because we see so much of Harry. I think some of it gets overshadowed by a lot of the stuff that he does. I think
because it's usually his feelings that other people are taking care of instead of him taking care of other people.
Yeah. So good job, Harry.
Yay, Harry.
So those are all the notes I had.
And that whole, I was going to say, and the whole, killing the snake and feeding the diary. Like those were good too, but really it was the sensitivity to the chick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very well done. Very well done.
So I really only have one more note after this.
So we had a lot of similar thoughts is what
we did. Well,
saying.
Maybe two. So one goes back to Slytherin, and I should have said this when you talked about your giant statue thing, but the giant statue, first of all, you make yourself a chamber, big giant chamber, and you put your big giant pet down there. And within your big giant chamber, you put a big giant you.
Yeah.
A big giant you statue. Ego much? Or is it ego when you make yourself a giant chamber with a giant statue of you and your own giant pets and your own snake pets and only your descendants can get in there? But it's like a vast, egotistical, like, me party room.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should be too surprised by everything we've heard about Salazar Slytherin, that he definitely thinks that he's better than most people.
This is true.
Like a high percentage of people, like almost every other person besides a small minority in the world. Because we're led to believe there aren't that many wizards and magical folk. So he thinks he's better than everyone who's not that.
That's so funny.
So I think he's already got kind of an elitist, better than, holier than thou mentality for a lot of things.
Which honestly has been kind of a theme in this book.
And he's regarded as one of the 4 founders of the school, which I don't think you can not have immense skill at that to, have been a part of that with the other 3 that we hear, a lot about. So he probably is in the top 4 to 10, even
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, but still, I mean, that when you already think that stipulation makes you better than everybody, and then you realize that you're in the upper echelon of that select group, I don't know.
All right.
The ego thing makes sense to me. It's not surprising.
Yeah,
I don't agree
why
with
would your
it.
statue look like a monkey?
It's just a likeness.
Okay. So my last little random thought, and we didn't even really touch too much on Ron and Lockhart, and we go through all of them, but it's when they come back up through the bathroom and they meet Myrtle. She has such a crush on Harry.
I know. It's cute, isn't it?
And she says, if you had died, you'd have been welcome to share my toilet.
And Ron goes, ugh.
I did that. It's gross. Ugh,
Yeah.
gives me the willies up the back of my crawlies. Ugh. But it's so creepy. But here's what's funny. That's kind of what happens in middle school. Is people that you would never have considered come up to you and you're like, hey, I like you. And you're like, what? What? I just
Why?
like that. JK's version is the ghost. The crying, whining, miserable, decrepit, ghost. And she's like, hi, Harry.
She's been there for 50 years with no one that's ever paid her attention, especially boys. I mean, she's in the girls' bathroom all the time.
Also true.
So, I mean, it's a proximity and, closeness thing, too. They spent a lot of time together this year. Well, close to each other this year. So,
yes.
I don't know. I agree that she's weird. I agree that it's awkward that she was basically hoping that he would die. But
I know.
I see where her intentions are coming from.
Sure. Okay.
Someone's got to stick up for Myrtle for once. It's weird.
No, see,
it's
I don't
weird.
think anybody has to stick up for Myrtle. I disagree with you. I think she can just be creepy.
Well, do you want to hear my 5 burning questions for you?
Oh my gosh, let's move on to those questions.
So, question number 1. If a hero is only as good as his or her weapon, why would Harry ever cast his wand aside?
Oh,
Ever.
Philatides would have kicked him out of hero school.
You're out!
Hero work
You bum.
101. Never put down your wand. Wand in hand. You need 2 hands. Wand in pocket.
Yeah, wand in teeth.
Wand down your pants, although that could be dangerous. How about a wand holder, like a holster?
Yeah,
Or,
absolutely. A wand sheath.
Whoosh, and it pulls out. Yes. See, these are the things that Harry could have done. He did not.
He drops to his knees, caring about his friend.
Right.
But I don't care what he's doing. That's not acceptable to cast the wand aside. Come on.
I
man.
agree.
Come
The
on.
wand should never have been put down. You could have checked on her with one hand.
I agree. Hey, you okay? There's a giant monster. I need my one
holding my
thing
wand.
that makes me actually powerful.
You know what? I can even wrap it around with one pinky, and then I've got 9 fingers that I can.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
reasonable.
Nope.
Reasonable.
There was absolutely no reason why that wand should have been cast aside,
I agree.
which would have saved a little bit of heartache
Yeah.
here in this chapter,
They're
and maybe
a lot simpler.
I was going to say a lot less for you to write.
Yeah, that's for sure. Question 2. Do you think Hagrid did try to raise werewolf cubs under his bed while in school? The werewolves
my God.
again.
Okay. I think he tried to do something under his bed. Let's assume that he's probably not in the same house or the same year as Tom Riddle, so maybe these are just rumors.
Mm-hmm.
Werewolves are not animals. They are people. Werewolves are people that come out. What did we say? Once, maybe twice a month.
2 to 3 times a month. Yeah, 2 to 3 times
Sure.
Nights a month.
Nights. Not even days. Nights.
That's a good
They
question, too. I think
don't-
we mentioned that. What if the full moon's up in the day sky? But go ahead. Sorry.
Fine. They don't have cubs. They have people babies. If they have babies, they're going to be people babies. They're not going to spawn wolf type. It is not a thing.
Right,
Werewolf
unless there's
cups
some
and-
weird bestial difference thing going on that might be above this podcast to talk about. Which let's get past that possibility.
We need a new movie monster.
Right. How about a swamp thing? How about a mummy? How about a
Building a
creature from the
Frankenstein.
Black Lagoon?
Fine. He's raising his own Nessie in the lake.
How about Big Bird?
Whatever. An Oscar the Grouch living. I don't care.
Snuffleupagus, fine. The werewolf
Those are
thing
imaginary.
is a little much at this point.
It is overused.
Yep.
And it's only book 2.
And it's book 2. Question 3. Are all of the similarities between Harry and Tom just a coincidence?
I think they are. I think Harry's reading too far into it. Just like
Right.
I think he read too far into the Sorting Hat saying, oh, you do good. And so I think he's
I
just
think it's like the
overreacting.
exact same thing. It's like, if I feel like there are similarities between me and him, that means that I might have like personality similarities to him, which I think clearly they don't.
But that's what we do as humans. When we get to know somebody new, you look for the things that you have in common. That's how you make connections with people.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I think that's what he's doing is he's noticing those commonalities and making a connection. It's not a good connection. It's not like one that we're going to say, ooh, let's go out and,
And there are some really big ones for him, because he knows that that Tom hated where he lived as, being raised by muggles. He knows that about him. He learned that in Dippett's office. He doesn't know anyone at school that had that same, upbringing similar to what Harry had. Basically begging to stay at school over the summer. Like Harry wants to do that.
Now watch me use your same point and prove you wrong. Harry's never made those kind of connections with people because of those things. So for him to find somebody even a little bit similar, it's going to stand out even more.
Right. I was talking against my original thought of, I think it makes sense for him to jump down this rabbit hole of, well, yeah, this is the closest thing to my own personal background that I've ever seen, especially in this very unique thing that we have together.
Right. And really, it may not have been.
Right.
It's
his first.
It appears that way.
Yeah. And then it comes down to the parcel mouth thing, which who knows? That's just a weird random trait, maybe.
Being able to speak to snakes does not make you evil.
Right.
Putting your soul in a journal so that you can someday manipulate young girls into doing your bidding, that might make you evil.
That might not be a good thing.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Question 4. Will Lockhart recover from his mind eraser?
Lord, I hope not.
He seems more fun this way, doesn't he? He
seems like a normal person.
Yeah.
Maybe a little scatterbrained. It's okay.
Yeah. So there's a podcast that I listen to, and they love Lockhart. Like I've only listened up until I don't listen past the chapter that we're actually recording on. They love Lockhart over and over, and I'm like, if they ever listen to our show, they're gonna hate us because I think, and I do feel like a lot more people are annoyed, like overly annoyed by Lockhart, that it's not enjoyable to have to deal with him so much this entire book. But I can see where there are some kind of downs, like from listening to them. And the show is the real Weird Sisters. Definitely give them a shot.
Yes.
They're very good. Their opinion of Lockhart's just a little different than ours, but they make a good point in saying that there are some really down and kind of boring scenes in this book throughout the middle of it that until he shows up and provides some zazz or pep to it, it would have been not memorable at all.
Valentine's Day.
Right. So like, in that aspect, I get it. It's just so much of him.
The
it's
scene
so
when they're talking about the petrified Mrs. Norris, he definitely he made it funny.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I can see their point, but that doesn't make me like him.
Right.
I like his function.
Right. And maybe I'm misinterpreting what they could very well be saying that they like the purpose that he serves for the story. But
yes,
it's just especially on rereads, I think it's even more difficult to go through and just hear him again and again and again.
I really like Mind Erased Lockhart.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Me too.
Question 5. Was Fawkes or the sword more of a deus ex machina? And for those, if I think we've talked about it before, but Deus Ex Machina is a seemingly unsolvable problem, which is suddenly and abruptly resolved by the inspired or unexpected intervention of some new events, character, ability, or object. So it's kind of something just shows up at the last second to save the day. I feel like both of those fit that category a bit.
Well, okay, so let me ask you, are you asking which one is that or which one does that more?
Which one does that more? I feel like
Because
they both fit
do
that.
it. Okay.
So I was jumping past that because I think we would agree on that.
True. I believe it's the sword, and here is why. We've met Fox.
Mm-hmm.
We were given the properties of Fox.
Right.
We seen him burned alive and reborn, and we got, I don't even remember what they are, but we got a list of some traits of phoenixes in general.
Right.
So I feel like Fox is more of Chekhov's gun.
I agree. That is completely fair.
He was brought up in Act 1. Hey, look, there's a phoenix in Act 1, and they happen to have healing properties in their tears and some other things.
And they can carry really heavy weights, and they're extremely loyal, and
blah, blah, blah. Look at my really cool burning bird. Hey,
and they're invincible. Yeah.
And he's very loyal to me. And
or regenerative.
Might be a difference, Dumbledore. Only people who are loyal to Dumbledore.
So that'd be the Act 2 reintroduction of it.
Yes.
Of the idea.
Yes. So the sword, no idea what that thing is.
Right.
Random sword fears.
Like, how often do they have to describe the sorting hat of being? Well, when you're in a place of peril, you can just grab a sword from it. What?
Right. Like the sorting hat we've seen before, Fox we've seen before, there's some random sword. No idea.
Yeah, I agree. The Fox as a Chekhov's gun, I think, is better described, for sure.
All right. So, Luke, let's get into, what was your favorite line?
So, it's right after Tom reveals that he's Voldemort, and Harry basically goes on to say that I bet Dumbledore saw right through you. And it says, the smile had gone from Riddle's face to be replaced by a very ugly look. Dumbledore's been driven out of this castle by the mere memory of me, he hissed. He's not as gone as you might think, Harry retorted. He was speaking at random, wanting to scare Riddle, wishing rather than believing it to be true. So it's basically and then soon after that is when Fox actually shows up. But it's the ego that we see from Tom, that he clearly thinks that no matter, because he doesn't know what future Voldemort really turned into other than what he's learned from Ginny.
Right.
And I don't think she told him that, and maybe he just didn't listen, that Voldemort, even future Voldemort, was still afraid of Dumbledore.
Right.
I like that Harry puts him in his place. I think it, again, washes right over time. He doesn't realize it, but I like that Harry doesn't back down, even though he's just trying to delay and keep Tom talking. But I thought it was a good line by Harry.
Here's what's funny. My favorite line is right before yours.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And so I was listening to you, and then I started kind of thinking about, your comments, and I'm like, oh God, did he just say what I was going to say?
We've been very much on the same point on this whole chapter. I feel like we've agreed a lot.
Which is funny. So my line comes right before that, and it's all in that same sort of vein. And it's right after, Riddle does his whole, I am the greatest, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'm fantastic. And Harry, after being really mad, stops and takes a breath and finally forces himself to speak.
You're not, he says, his quiet voice full of hatred. Not what? Snapped Riddle. Not the greatest sorcerer in the world, said Harry, breathing fast. Sorry to disappoint you and all that, but the greatest wizard in the world is Albus Dumbledore.
Yeah, that does lead directly into mine.
Directly. Literally, there's 4 more sentences than yours.
Yeah.
But, in the face of all this, he gets so mad, and he's like, no, it's Dumbledore, because that's the thing that calls Fox. That's the part, that help will always be given to those who need it. So that was my favorite line.
Yeah, and that whole thing is actually reminding me of a point that I was going to make earlier. I think it fits right into here of when we were kind of talking about how all the exposition that Tom did to kind of go through and describe everything that he did and how awesome and cool and stuff he is.
Blah, blah.
I like that so far in this book, it wasn't just at the end, Dumbledore having, being the omniscient narrator for us and giving us all of the information, which I feel like we had a little bit at the end of last book, even though he said, I won't, I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm not going to tell you everything. But I like that it was more natural the way the information flowed in this whole conversation between Harry and Tom.
Yes.
And it wasn't just which would have been exposition if it was Dumbledore basically laying out, here is what I've learned, and these are the things that have happened all year, and this is why it is. I like that it was a more natural feeling conversation between these two people, that Harry just realized he found somebody else to hate. It's the same person, but he found a new version of that person to hate.
Yeah. Well, and this version is more, odd enough to say, more human to him, because
yeah.
kid closer to your age, it's not this
more
mythical,
relatable.
like, yes, like I can hate this person. I can give him a name, a real name, and not a
right. Yeah, not a pseudonym behind a mask on the back of someone's head, like just weird abstract villain, which I think it was last book.
Right. I agree. I did have a runner-up line.
I have a runners-up too. Go with yours as well. Go with yours first.
Okay, so my runner-up line, which is really just sort of funny, it's,
"If this is dying," thought Harry, "it's not so bad."
I thought that was a nice line. I really did. He thinks he's dying, and he's just like...
Right. I mean, he wasn't, because at that point he'd already been healed, but just like, all right, I can do this. Like, man, wouldn't that be nice if, like, all pain was that. No big deal.
So
where's my phoenix?
So mine is, right after the...
"Oh well, I'd just been thinking, if you had died, you'd have been welcome to share my toilet," said Myrtle, blushing silver.
Which is funny too, blushing silver.
"Ah," said Ron, as they left the bathroom for the dark, deserted corridor outside. "Harry, I think Myrtle's grown fond of you. You've got competition, Ginny."
But then she keeps crying, and that's why I think it's good of Harry not to bring up what she's actually been through.
Oh my gosh,
the full depth of what she's been through. Because what she's going through right now that Ron's aware of is enough. Like that's a lot.
Yeah. I wonder. Never mind. Go ahead.
No, what do you got?
All right, so let's get into our chapter MVPs.
Okay, so I have the answer, and it's not the answer I really want to give.
Well, here's what's funny. My answer is not the answer I really want to give.
So you
either.
take my answer,
and you do the real answer.
I think the real answer is very obvious. I think Harry absolutely earned the chapter MVP this chapter.
And I think this chapter gives a great example of why we are so hesitant to always award it to Harry.
Mm-hmm. It's not the heroic things that I'm even looking at, and we talked about this whole thing.
It's the moment with Ron not telling Ginny.
Right. It's the worrying about her emotions and how fragile her whole life has become. And he's aware of that.
Well, and it's even in the face of like almost certain death defending Dumbledore.
Yeah.
To Tom Riddle. It's
that raw heroism. It's not the action-packed stuff, which he still does.
It doesn't help that he also killed the snake.
Right. And that's not hurt him.
Diary.
I feel like we wouldn't be doing his actual character justice by not awarding it to him this chapter.
Right. So yes, I agree with you.
So who is your honorable mention?
My honorable mention is Fawkes, the Phoenix, because, Harry would have died without him. And I think like he's the one who made the snake defeatable.
Right, yeah, he took that weapon away.
He is the one who saved Harry when he was stabbed by the basilisk fang.
He dropped the diary on Harry.
He flew them all out of the chamber.
Yeah, for sure. So
I definitely think he was like literally an MVP. He was the most valuable player in that action sequence.
Yeah, if you're gonna look at the stats, maybe
that, or like he was like leading in assists.
Oh yeah, I mean,
like if Harry made all the baskets, it was all fed to him by Fawkes. He was the assist guy.
I think that's fair. Yeah, and it was like it's like Fawkes would coast to coast on the ice in hockey, and then just at the last second pass it over for a quick one timer tap in, where it's like go fine, get the goal. I did everything leading up to this.
Yes.
I gave you all of the pieces. Thank you for finishing it for us.
And yet your name's going to be the one
on the book.
You're going to be the person with all the sponsorship. And your name's going to be on the cover.
Not Fawkes the Phoenix and the Chamber of Secrets, which is not a bad name. It's not a bad book title. It's got a nice little ring to it. Fawkes the Phoenix and the Chamber of Secrets.
Or Fawkes the Phoenix and the kid who's in the basement that I have to save again.
Yeah, and the kid who's going to live again because of me.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's completely reasonable. In my hesitation to give it to Harry because we avoid that, Fawkes was easily the the runner-up, the honorable mention. Who did you have as your secondary honorable mention previously?
And I hesitate on this one because it's not like this character did a lot other than not die. But Ginny, like the fact that
she was the direct object in the sentence of this chapter, right? I mean, everything was done.
We've gone from everything from like a
her,
basketball
basically.
and hockey reference rate to like diagramming sentences. So
I don't know how, like, that's just what made sense to me. Like it just.
It's more like, so I agree with you. She definitely was sort of a catalyst for all of this going on. But for me, it's more, she refused to die.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how much fighting she was able to do to, like, slow down that progress bar that we talked about. Like, I'd be interested to get her perspective on that.
I'm telling you, I want to read that. But like, and then once she woke up, it was extremely like, it was me, it was my fault. And Harry was totally like, no, I got this. Like, I know, we just read the diary, but just like
owning up to it.
Yes. Owning it. And even just surviving that.
Yeah.
No matter who else helped you, the fact that you didn't really she didn't save herself. She definitely was sort of a damsel in distress, which is always a little questionable for me and that whole girly thing. But I see why, because the guy who came and saved her didn't do it and it wasn't expect anything.
Yeah, it wasn't specifically for her, for a special
right. It's because
one-on-one.
Somebody needs to be saved. Right. And
she did.
It just surviving something like that is is commendable.
And she did play her part in giving enough information to Harry and Ron when Percy showed up at the last feast or whatever that they became skeptical. And then whenever she got pulled in, it helped them put the puzzle pieces together as to what was actually going on. I think it wasn't a huge part, but it definitely helped them.
Right. Well, and the fact that she was ready to start talking to somebody. I mean, it probably should have been an adult, but 11.
Right. Definitely. Good chapter.
All right. That wraps us up for this particular episode. If you have Ginny in the Chamber of Secrets in your fanfic, I would like you to tag me in it on Twitter at NotNamePodcast or email it to me specifically, not the podcast, me, Melissa. I want to read it. The podcast that must not be named at gmail.com. You can find us online and all of our family of podcasts at thepodcastthat.com.
Subscribe and rate us on iTunes. Please leave us some comments. Those comments and ratings really go a long way to help us finding more listeners. Also, subscribe, rate us, and leave comments on YouTube, where we have our videos with our fancy logo on there.
The next chapter is chapter 18.
Dobby's Reward. Stay imaginary.
Thanks.
And then Bill throws the photo album across the room and goes and it starts bleeding. That's right. Just saying, watch out for this clown.
Sometimes there's not a deeper meaning. Yeah, I kind of mentioned that in my...
So I really like that it starts off just like the Ben chapter before. It starts off with old Bill, and he's flying at Barry, and Barry is rushing at him. And Bill finally realizes where the ideas for his books come from. We knew all of them, but watching it dawn on him is very
emotionally attacked by this line. The "Stop, Daddy, I'm sorry, I love you."
Yeah,
teared up right now.
I can only imagine how scary that is. Getting the news you just got, and then it starting to come back. Something you worked your entire life to slow down and do, but now here it comes again.
I think he has a death wish, but it's less of a death wish and more of a forgetting wish. Like, if he can go fast enough, he can feel better, and this will all go.
Something bad's coming, and if she follows him, she's gonna be in danger.
The podcast that floats down here.
January 12th. Subscribe now.